Today, we welcome Torrey Bates, Executive Director of For the Kingdom here in Memphis, Tennessee. Torrey inspires us on becoming catalysts for change. He and his team have innovated and thought creatively on becoming advocates for curing childhood hunger in our very own community, in our very own backyard here in Memphis, Tennessee. So let's get to it and hear from Torrey Bates in the green chair. Torrey.
Hey.
Hey, you're in the green chair.
I am in the green chair.
Thank you for being here. This is a huge honor to have you here. So I've been really excited about this conversation.
You got a brown-skinned man blushing right now. I appreciate it. Likewise. I mean, I watch you online. The family watches you. As I said, I catch your little proverbs on Instagram. So you're somewhat like a COVID hero at home. So it's cool to be in the flesh with you as well in the work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I love your story. I love what you're doing for the kingdom. You've got the shirt on.
FTK,
you're representing.
For the kingdom, for the kids.
You're doing some crazy cool stuff. And I want to just dive in the middle of it. We'll kind of circle back on your story some.
Okay.
Catalyst for change. You are a massive catalyst for change in the city of Memphis. And I am so excited about what you're doing, and particularly with this Feed the Block stuff. I would love for you to talk a little bit about, I can't get it out of my head when we were having our conversation. You were talking about how you're like, I knew poverty existed in Memphis. I knew childhood hunger existed in Memphis. I don't think I realized how bad.
Yeah, I think it's hard for any of us to truly fathom when you open up a pantry that has food and a fridge that typically has food, right? And you typically miss a meal just because you can and it doesn't hurt you. It's a different life, right? And so we had some sort of an inkling of an idea because we had 30 or 40 children that were coming over to see us every day. When the pandemic hit, those kids stopped, and yet we knew that there was hunger, but the massive amounts was beyond us. You know, you sometimes think with well-manicured lawns and apartment complexes that look like they're getting better and on the rise, that things are changing. But with over 18,000 kids living in poverty, it was somewhat of a moving from a poverty percentage to actually seeing the faces of actual children has definitely been humbling, been moving, and then the shock and awe of daily knowing that daily we wake up to dings of new families registering their children because they've heard of Feed the Block.
Wow. Okay, so now pulling back a little bit, For the Kingdom, for those who don't know, where is it located? Kind of what's your goal, purpose, mission behind that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so For the Kingdom, we're located in Raleigh.
Okay.
Raleigh, which was the first place that Shelby County actually had a seat. And so Raleigh was known as a tourist attraction, known for our hot springs. There's still a beach in Raleigh. And so we're clustered in a very beautiful area that has changed due to divestment over the last 20 years. We're a 100-acre property that was built on the back of Jim Stewart, who owns Stax Records. Went into bankruptcy, and a wealthy family acquired the property, and then 2 years later, our landowners, which is a very cool story, ended up acquiring it out of really a vision. Becky Cunningham is her name. She tells a story as a stay-at-home mom taking her children to work to school one day, and she had this vision where all she saw were dark-skinned children playing in a place of peace. And she took that vision as it being that God wanted there to be a place in Memphis where minority children would have a place for summer camp. That's all she saw. That was the only thing she saw, and she carried the vision for a couple of years. And over those years, God opened up a lot of doors, and they ended up acquiring the property for over. It was listed at $600,000. They got it at a little bit under $300,000.
What? I didn't know that.
All because her and her husband got together and prayed about what they should offer as the asking price, because they knew they couldn't afford the $686 or whatever they were asking. And they said, hey, let's both pray about it and not tell each other, right? And see what number God gives us. And so that's how they started. And they prayed. And a few days later, they got together, and God had given them the same number. And this landowner had been offered so many different options, and he took the offer because he really saw that he wanted the property to be owned by believers. And so,
cool.
there you have it. And so our vision has been, since the beginning, to provide life-changing experiences for all people. Our mission has changed a lot, obviously, with the times, and as things have changed, so have we in regards to our pivot. We started off just as a day camp in the late 90s. That grew from a day camp to Memphis Leadership Foundation, and Larry Lloyd and Howard Eddings, which are both members here, I believe, caught the vision, were inspired, and now everything that you see on our 100 acres, our Poplar Auditorium, our dining hall that could seat 500, our 12 cabins, zip lines, ropes courses, with the help of Larry Lloyd and Howard Eddings, all those things were built by the friendly, generous people of Memphis at no charge. So all of For the Kingdom was built with no debt.
That's crazy. You know, I don't know that you know this. So I was in, I want to say I was in high school or middle school.
Okay.
Like I helped build those cabins. We were part of every summer we would come in and we would help. I don't even remember what I did. I mean, I remember it was just like, I didn't actually build a cabin, but we were part of helping build some of that. And then that I just love that connection. I was actually, because I love For the Kingdom, we used to do this, before the pandemic, we did a Go and Do.
Oh, I remember getting
you remember that? I was there.
I remember when you were there with your kids.
Yeah, we brought me and Tommy and the girls all came out there.
Y'all were in the game room.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah. So I have such a heart for your mission and what you guys are doing. It's so neat. And I can't imagine how much that has changed. I mean, okay, you're talking about camps. Now let's talk about a pandemic, right? A pandemic happens, and so everything shuts down. I mean, how has everything, I mean, that's kind of the birthing place of some really cool things.
Yeah, like we were, I had only been here a year. At the time, I was coming out of the first year. I got here in January of 2019. My family and I literally moved here on Dr. King's birthday weekend, coming from Atlanta. So it was kind of nostalgic for us, then living 15 minutes from where he's assassinated, in an area of the city we wouldn't typically be able to live in had it been during those times. And so we felt all of that. But coming out of that year, we had seen more service revenue than we ever seen. We'd hosted more events we never hosted. So we certainly thought, 2020
is
gonna be the year, baby. We're gonna knock it out the park. God's gonna be good. We're gonna be able to do more independent, in the neighborhood. And then a pandemic happens, and of course it shut us down. I mean, you couldn't find a date on our calendar for 2020 before the pandemic. We were booked solid through like October, November.
Wow.
And so when the pandemic hit, so did a lot of our service revenue, so did a lot of our plans, and we found ourselves kind of asking God, what did he want us to do? We knew that there had to be something due to the state of our community, but just didn't know what. Then when we kind of got a wind, the kids were struggling and hungry. And then when the Shelby County had the positive test from one of their nutritionists and shut down, we were sitting in devotion one Monday. It was me and 6 others. And we came out of prayer asking the Lord what he wanted from us. And I could hear as clear as day, the Holy Spirit saying, what are you waiting on? And I got up from my office at the table, and I went and talked to our one chef at the time, Chef Rick, and we got with our vendors and we ordered all prepackaged food, and we said, we should have enough. We allocated about $2,000 and thought, this would be enough to get us started with whatever we're doing. And we went out. We went out to the neighborhood right next to us with about 50, 75 prepackaged deli sandwiches, chips and cookie, with speakers and a tent. And we set up, and before you knew it, 30 minutes later, all the food was gone.
Wow.
Went back same day.
You said 30
30 minutes later,
30
same
minutes.
thing, every day for that first week. By the last day, talking just one apartment complex, we went from 50 to 150 meals in that week. And by the end of the week, when we showed up, kids were at the mailboxes where we would set up, waiting on us. And so we knew there was something in it. And so Feed the Block became kind of our coin for us to be able to express on our digital platforms to our community that we were here right now for them. And so word spread, we began to reach out to more apartment complexes, property managers, most of which were all for it. And we got to go set up in some tough spaces where we hear gunfire every night, and we hear, they're always on the news for murders and everything. We were able to set up tents and begin with just sack lunches to build relationships with our neighbors in ways I had never fathomed. And I know for FTK, our work has always been for everyone, but like, hey, bring a group with you, not necessarily us, digging deep in our community and actually reaching one child at a time. And so it was definitely a different work.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what is that looking like now? How is that continuing to grow? What is that? How has that evolved?
Yeah, so we started with that 150. That 150 between March when we started and December when we took our first break, we were at a little over 1,000 meals a day.
Wow.
We went from sack lunches to Shelby County came back into school. They began to open up the nutrition side again, at least. And so families could go pick up meals. And so in order to always be in collective partnership, we moved from lunch to dinner, since Shelby County was going to be providing breakfast and lunch. And so we created a menu of that rotates every 5 days of hot meals, all with their own names of everything, most of which are some of my children's names, spread throughout the meals. Yeah. But each meal is prepared. We've got 3 of the best chefs in the city that are in our kitchen daily, that are working hard. Coming out of December, we kind of slowed down a little bit. If I backed up a little bit, in September, we got a grant from, it was called the Tennessee Cares Grant. Okay. Now, we had been carrying this mission from the first 2,000 we started with. All of a sudden, our phones started ringing from healthcare organizations, individuals. Wow. How much would it cost to feed a block? How much would it cost to feed 200 children? These became the calls we got daily. Wow. And our cost per meal was so low that, $500 would feed, a little bit over 500 children for a week, know? And so we were seeing God begin to provide in a way. And so Feed the Block became an expression of his love for us, that God had heard the cry of Raleigh. And we were just there to help answer it. Wow. And so we came back out of December, and I found myself asking the question, not because there's more children to be fed, but the food is similar to how manna was for the children of Israel. It's only supposed to be temporary, right? Yeah. And so I began to ask God, like, what else is there for us? And what we've heard is that just as if the physical food is such a need, there's a spiritual anemia in Raleigh. Because of the divestment, churches that were once owned and filled with white parishioners were now divested, moved out, but families, they moved, but they didn't sell. So they rented to minorities. So we're now moving into these churches, moving into these homes, and it only creates this systematic poverty, right, that we don't even realize even in the body of Christ we are a part of. Because now all these families, these pastors, the only thing they know is rent. How can you teach wealth? How can you teach a God of abundance when literally every time you stand, you've got to be worried about whether or not you can pay the rent? Same, and that flows right down to the congregation, right? But then you think about that, and then you raise generations in these same neighborhoods that are now tough, that went from this abundant place similar to Germantown to being in a space that is very, very rotten, and you can see where the world has had its effect. And now you have families growing up, and you've got 4 or 5 generations when we look back at history now that have grown up absent of even understanding that there is a God.
Wow. You're preaching right now.
And so we see the physical and the spiritual food have to go hand in hand. And so where Feed the Block is now kind of morphed into for us is that we've created a mobile app that allows families in the neighborhood to find us.
Oh, that's really neat. Yeah.
Along with that mobile app, they get words of encouragement every day. Out of the now 700 plus meals we're doing a day, as we charge toward our goal of 1,800 for the year is really where we're trusting God for. What we've seen in this process is that we've seen kids dancing at doors. We've seen all of those sort of elements, but we've also seen is an open door. We're in over 600 houses every day. Wow. So since then, we've been creating literacy, right? New parables, old parables told in new ways in order to educate young people and their families around the hope that we can find in God and in Christ.
Wow. And so you're just pouring into the neighborhood around you. I love that. I love that. I can't, we're talking about this catalyst for change. Sure. And what is so cool to me is that, this pandemic that was it's heavy. Let's just be honest. It's been a heavy season. We have the civil unrest. We have sickness. We have death. It's just a very, very difficult season. Yes, and out of this season, God has been pressing you guys, and you're birthing this change within your community. That's so powerful. I would love for you to lean into What like lessons as you made this change? Is lessons on that pivot? I mean, that's a hard. We kind of glossed over it, right? You're talking about like, I'm praying and God tells me to do this, and you do it, and I'm sure it wasn't that easy.
It was not that easy. We got a lot of no's starting out of like calling those pros who do it.
Yeah.
And they were just like everyone, like, hey, we don't really have the capacity right now. We're trying to figure out what we're doing, how we're gonna move. But I would say the biggest lessons that we've learned definitely start with the fact that God, when he starts to work in our life from childhood, there's nothing that he's not doing on purpose. I can remember being 7, 8 years old. I grew up in Atlanta, about 30 minutes north of Atlanta, called Alpharetta. But I'm a suburban kid that grew up in a home that my parents did everything they could to establish us out of poverty. So I was removed from the Raleigh of the world. So it was kind of like a young prince, so to speak, the way I saw it. But I can remember sitting on a rooftop in downtown Atlanta, eating lunch with my stepmom and her friend, and they were, doing what ladies do, and all of a sudden, my eyes kind of glimpsed across the street where there was a McDonald's in like a storefront in downtown, and I saw this homeless man outside in the trash can. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this. This homeless man was going in the trash can. And all of a sudden the voices at the table with me and my stepmother and her friend were kind of drowned out because my eyes were glued. And he was going in the trash can putting, sandwich after sandwich in his bag. And I was moved. And then the manager came out. And the manager took the bag from him, poured out all the food, and literally told him to go away.
Wow.
And I thought, that's free food. Like, it's what was thrown away. Why? And like growing up, going to church every Sunday sort of was my story. Anytime they gave me a chance to pray in church, I prayed for that man. Because back then I thought he was the only one. I had no idea that there was millions of people around the world that were in his same state, and the majority of them being treated the same way he is. Not seen, no dignity, treating as if he's not human. And Feed the Block, the biggest lesson it's taught me is that God has been preparing my heart since I've been a kid for this work, right? And that work is to share the love of Jesus by ending food disparity. And so that would be the first lesson, is that there are no moments in our life that are wasted moments.
Yeah.
Even when we're away from God and have no idea that he is there, his love is preparing us to make him famous, I would say that would be the first. The second would be obedience. This work was birthed by God, and I think it's birthed out of the cry of Raleigh. You talk 20 plus years of every night you hear nothing but gun violence. Every night children are struggling, right? We walk into some of these tight spaces that are like homeless hotels, and you see sex trafficking happening right there in our neighborhood.
Wow.
You see men counting down the money they just earned on the backs of some teenage girl that goes to one of our local schools.
Wow.
But her family can't afford a house. They're living in this homeless hotel. And we're going in to serve them food. And what I'm noticing in us serving the food, the amount of stories that we're getting from children, the amount of things our eyes are seeing are not for naught. They're because our Father is always looking to wage war against those things that pull us away from him. But it takes our hands, our feet to go, And so I would say that, obedience.
Yeah.
All we heard was, go feed the children. That's all we heard. And we started with, 50 meals and, $1 million investment later from the state and from the kind, the Christian community foundations and the great, all of them have allowed us to make some segue. But it started with obedience.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. I've heard too that when we get proximate with people, when we kind of get in people's homes, it really, it kind of reframes the things that we think through.
For sure.
I think we can have a stigma or a stereotype of people in the margins or people who are homeless, but when we are in their home, like what you are, it sounds like you're just given this entirely different perspective and kind of almost like a pan out of getting to see, like, here's what's really happening. Here's what's really going on. And this is right down the street from where I am.
And that's been the other thing I've learned personally is that there's a Walmart in our neighborhood. One of really 2 grocery stores in our neighborhood, right? But there's a homeless couple that I've seen since literally my first time being here, right? First day I pulled in to Raleigh, I went to that Walmart, I can remember seeing them. But I can remember seeing them thinking, huh, and kept going. But as weeks and days and months went by, there's a lot of times I went to that Walmart that I don't remember seeing them, although they were there. Yeah. And what is waking my heart up to is the fact that our God, who sees all, is calling us to spaces and people that typically we don't even see.
Wow.
Like those same people, I was able now to stop, and we were able to pull out a meal, a hot dinner, and we've been able to build a story with them and find out where they stay. And we've learned so much, but the work is writing on our hearts. Like Paul talks about, like you are writing on, as he's writing to the Corinthians, he talks about how they're writing on his heart in pen and in ink. And the things that they're leaving with him, both the good, the bad, and the indifferent, are things that he will carry with him to eternity. Like to watch a door open and to see a pallet, seas of blankets, and children dancing at the door of a sign of a hot meal. That's hope, right? To walk into a homeless hotel and to see a woman who is, you can tell, is selling herself in order to provide for her family. And for her not to want to be seen by us, but for us to knock on her door day after day, that by day 5, they're chasing us down to the 3rd floor, although they stay on the 1st floor, because her kids are like, Mommy, but we're hungry. And now you show up at that hotel and they're like, we missed you over the weekend. And her children pour out their hearts and share their grades, all because we're carrying the good news in a 3-compartment container. These same children, we ran flyers into their elementary schools for summer camp, and we've never met them. You know?
Yeah.
And so I say again, it's the obedience to follow the voice of God to spaces that maybe you're uncertain about. But it's just the obedience alone. He's going to do the work. He just needs us to be obedient and go. And so he's birthed the work, similar to how he heard the cry of the children of Israel, right? And he raised up everything that he needed to carry out his task. In the same way, that is our story. Feed the Block is his expression of love to the people of Raleigh, that he's heard their cry and that he's come. And the shalom of God is there. His peace is there for them to be able to touch in a real way through food.
Okay, Torrey, I am loving what you're saying, and I am resonating, and you are challenging the mess out of me personally in my perspective. And I am sitting here thinking, this is a 2-part conversation.
Okay.
I want to hear about your story, how you got to Memphis. That's crazy in and of itself. That has to do with this. And then I also want really practical things about how we can be catalysts for change, because what you're saying is just so true to what we're seeing in our community, what we're seeing in our cities. And I really want us to kind of dive into that. So we're going to pause this conversation.
Okay.
You're going to be our first ever 2-part conversation.
Okay.
We're going to pause this, and we're going to come back, and we're going to be with you guys next Thursday, 8 a.m. We're going to do the second part of this conversation with Torrey Bates. So stay tuned.